Welcome to yet another Sad Boys book review. My name is Dusty, and today I will be reviewing The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, book 3 in the original Mistborn trilogy. And, oh man, I gotta say, this was in the running for my favorite book of 2024. It was great. It was fantastic. I loved it so much. There are so many good things I can say about this book. It was great. The pacing was fantastic, very frenetic at times, but yeah, Sanderson knew exactly when to slow things down and when to speed them up. The character writing is, I would say, the best it's been in the entire trilogy at this point. The story was great. I don't know if I would say every single beat of the story was my favorite of the trilogy, but the way he wrapped it up was perfection. The ending was so good, and I'll admit I'm not really one that can get overtly emotional in like consuming media, but this book got some tears out of me. I was a bit of a mess by the end of it. It got me good. It was very, very, very good. I really enjoyed it. Just an incredibly well written book. The action, as always from Sanderson, the action as always from Sanderson was on point. As people know, I'm a stickler for character writing. I love it so much, and like I said earlier, the character writing I think was at its best with this book. Everything just built so nicely to it. Everything that's happened in the Final Empire and the Well of Ascension led to this final book, and I think everything got paid off beautifully. It's just, without going into spoilers, it's just really hard to say much other than just keep praising this book. It's one of my favorites that I've read in a very, very long time. I can't recommend the Mistborn trilogy enough. It's such a complete trilogy, and one of the hardest things to do is stick the landing, and I really feel like he did very, very well. I recommended this series to my wife, I think, after I finished the Final Empire, and I was like, you need to read it, it's very good. And for some reason, oddly enough, with Sanderson and my wife, it takes some time for her to really get going in it. Like, the first thing she ever read with Sanderson was Skyward, and she started it and kind of dragged for a couple of months until it finally hooked her, and then she read all 3 of the books and the short story collection, or the novella collection, whatever, the Skyward Flight, within the span of like a month or two. And then this was before Defiant came out, and then I got her Defiant, and then she just sped through that. So once she got hooked, she was in it. And the same thing happened with Mistborn. With the Final Empire, it took her a while. She was really struggling to get into it, and then she finally got over that hump, and then something clicked, it hooked in with her, and she just blitzed through the entire trilogy. And it was quite an experience watching her finish the Hero of Ages as well, because I'd finished it too. I finished it like a month or so prior, and just to have her experience it as well, this book hit both of us quite hard, and that's just, I don't know what more of an endorsement you can give a book other than just it emotionally wrecked me by the end of it. Just so emotionally satisfying, and I left the book extremely satisfied because everything wrapped up well, and I was so happy with the ending, but also extremely bummed because I just wanted to spend more time in this world with these characters. The term that I hear used a lot is book hangover, and I definitely feel like this did give me a book hangover. It was on my mind for days after I finished it. I was just thinking about everything that happened in it, how the cards kind of played by the end of it, and just where the world was at the end of it. And it stuck with me, man. It still sticks with me. Like, almost, it's been, at the point of recording here, it's been 8 months since I finished it, and it's still there. I don't know what else to say. This was a fantastic book. I highly recommend it if you've read the series or have an interest in the series. Just know that everything gets paid off extremely well. It rounds everything out really well, and yeah, it's incredibly worth it if you're into this type of fantasy. I don't know. It's very, very good, and this feels like almost like a hard review to make, because you want to try and be objective in your subjectivity, if that even makes sense. But like I said, it's just really hard for me to talk about it without going into spoilers, other than just saying it was good, it was great, it was excellent, it was one of my favorite books I read in 2024, is one of my favorite books I've read, period. Like, it's just hard to say more than that. Like, you know, if you want to just try and have some negativity to balance it out, yeah, I guess there were a couple of problems. There were some of the pacing maybe wasn't the best in some spots, but I didn't mind personally. Some of the characters weren't as interesting of perspective characters as others, which I didn't mind personally. Anyone that's read Song of Ice and Fire, especially A Feast for Crows, might be able to understand that some characters aren't always going to be as interesting as others, though for the record, I do like A Feast for Crows, and I do think that Dorne was not that big of a deal. It was pretty interesting in its own right, so I don't really, you know, that's a different story for a different day. But yeah, so like, it wasn't a perfect book by any means. There are flaws in it, there are faults in it, but it didn't matter to me. I don't try to get hung up on the faults too much unless they overpower the story itself, like with something like Assassin's Blade. But it was fine. Like, there were faults, there were problems, but that didn't matter to me, because to me personally, from my personal perspective, this was a perfect book. It had everything I wanted, and it did everything I loved in such an exceptional way that I just walked away from it feeling whole. Like when you have a perfect meal that leaves you perfectly satisfied, you're full, you can't even think about eating anymore, but you just lay back and you're just like, I'm ready to go to sleep. One of those just phenomenal meals. That's how this book left me, and that's why I just feel so strongly about it as I do. So I guess with that in mind, I am giving, this might be a shocker, The Hero of Ages a 10 out of 10. I loved it. Like I said, for me, for my personal metric, it was a perfect book. It may not be a perfect book to someone else, but for me it was, and for my intents and purposes, that's really what matters at the end of the day. So, yeah, I think that'll do it for this Sad Boys book review. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I will catch you next time. Take care.